Thank you so much, and good evening. I would like to start by taking you back in time. Take a few moments to think. What were you doing on March 11, 2020? That was the day when the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic. Where were you? Maybe you were in a supermarket buying all kinds of things like toilet paper, pasta, canned food, or masks, if you were lucky and they were still available where you were. Hold that memory for a moment. If you were in that supermarket, why did you decide to go there? How did you feel that day? And if you weren't, if you were at home, watching TV, scrolling the news, thinking, why on earth are people doing this? The same question for you. Why were you calm? Why did you decide to stay at home? I assume it's not because you don't need a toilet paper. Maybe you were that person buying it. Maybe someone close to you was, or maybe the person sitting next to you right now. But in all cases, the question remains the same. Why do we do what we do? As you know, I'm a disaster researcher, and I have been living in this world full of emergency for over a decade. In 2004, when the massive tsunami struck all the countries surrounded by Indian Ocean, I was 11, and I spent every evening glued to our tiny, small TV, watching news about search and rescue operations. So when I grew up, and I had to decide what I want to do with my life, the choice felt kind of natural. I wanted to help people. And when we are prepared, and when we know what to do, we can save lives. But here is the hard and sad reality. More than 4 out of 10 people on this planet believe they can't do anything at all to protect themselves when a disaster hits. Which brings us to how we make decisions during emergencies. If I have time to ask each of you individually, you would all give me different answers. Which is honestly not that surprising, because we are all different. And also because the list of factors affecting our emergency decision-making is a pretty long one. So let's start with how risks are communicated. Because how often and how loudly we speak about risks truly shapes human behavior. Yeah, we go back to toilet paper once more, and I promise it's worth it. Some companies saw their sales jump as much as 700%. That many people were buying toilet paper. We call this type of behavior panic buying. It is caused by perceived scarcity, uncertainty, greater risk perception, and also greater news monitoring, which is that communication angle. But one thing made the whole situation spiral even faster. Fear spreading online through social media, TV. And we know that the more we are exposed to crisis coverage, the more psychological distress we feel. We also know that negative comments and mocking social media posts about panic buying can become emotional trigger for panic and anxiety. So you had people who were unsure about the whole situation, and they responded how we usually do in emergency. We go and search for more information. And they found content that didn't help them at all. Pictures of empty shelves, posts filled worry, alarm, or mocking. And because we are social beings, we often judge intensity by an emergency by the reaction of others, whether online or offline. So all of a sudden, people weren't just unsure anymore. They were scared. And in that moment, stockpiling gave them something we all want to desperately feel and have in emergency: sense of control. And that feeling, even if it's temporary, makes us all feel better. Research suggests that when we communicate risks through personal stories, like something that happened to your friend or a neighbor, people are less likely to take risky actions, compared to when the same situation is presented through numbers or statistics. But as I told you before, the list of factors affecting our decision-making in an emergency is a pretty long one. And it includes our previous experiences, habits, emotions, our age. trust in authorities, sometimes lack of distrust, or source of that information, and training. Some of us were taught as children not to do dangerous, reckless things. But when it comes to emergency preparedness, we are seriously far behind. So before I go on, let me ask you something. Raise your hand if you have ever been through any kind of preparedness activity. Maybe you have 72-hour kit at home, or maybe emergency bag, evacuation bag, or you have been through some sort of training. Well, I can see that clearly because it's a bit of dark, but not that many hands in the air, at least I can see that. And honestly, that's not surprising. Only half of Americans know what to do in a life-threatening emergency, and just 5% have a fully stocked emergency kit. And Americans face plenty of disasters per year. I have conducted a research with 2 groups of students. One of them went through my disaster management course, while the other had no similar training. The course introduces the basics of emergencies, how planning works, people behave, what logistics look like in a crisis, and it is packed with case studies, introducing the real-life scenarios, and students have to solve it. Here's what I discovered. The students without this type of training are more willing to take risks by about 4 percentage points. But they also rely more on emotions, while the students with the disaster management training tend to think more analytically and assess the situation before acting. But this is not just about tendency to take risks. There is another key factor, perceived self-efficacy. That feeling, and belief, I will manage that. When something happens, I will just know what to do. Nicole Dash studied evacuation behavior of civilians during hurricanes. She discovered that when people believe they should do what they personally think is best, even when authorities advised otherwise, they were less likely to evacuate. And the students in my study showed something similar, not because they were reckless or stubborn, but because they genuinely believed they can manage the situation by themselves. But this belief as one of the most dangerous in emergency, because what we know is that us as humans, or civilians, are generally not very good at assessing risks. And my disaster management students are aware of that. They know that feeling in control doesn't always mean being in actual control. I love this quote, and I'm happy I can share it with you here tonight because it's human and it's honest. We all have moments when we know that something is risky and we decide to do it anyway. We all have that tiny little voice in our heads that says, oh, I will do it just this one, so it will be fine. And this is exactly the moment when decision-making becomes real. The good emergency decision-making starts with us being honest about our own behavior, not pretending that we are perfectly rational beings because we aren't. Here is what I found fascinating. We may take risks with our own lives, but we hesitate when someone else might get hurt. The respondents from both groups were on the same page, hesitant to risk when someone else was in danger, which is really a good thing. But the disaster management students repeatedly mentioned someone else. They mentioned first responders, but not just as someone who is there to help them. They were aware that their decision can become someone else's emergency. Earlier, I told you that risks communicated through personal stories can be more effective, that it makes us less willing to take risks. But there is also a catch. When we hear about someone else's mistakes, we tend to think, I'm smarter, I'm faster, I know better, I won't do the same mistake, I'm a better driver, you name it. And just like that, the story stops being a warning, and it becomes a reason to feel overly confident. This is where we, as researchers and practitioners, have work to do. We can't simply assume that because something once worked, it will always work for everyone in every situation. We need to keep testing whether the things we believe we know, we actually know, and whether they are still valid. Because even the most effective tools like personal stories can backfire if they make people underestimate risks instead of becoming more aware. And why does it matter? Why are we here tonight? Because poor decisions lead to dangerous outcomes, like the ones you can see around me. Or what we saw on 9/11 when some people took time to shut down their computers before leaving the building that was just hit by a plane. And they weren't an exception. Research shows that more than half of people delay their evacuations for various reasons, to gather their things, wait for someone, or for something similar. Why do we do that? Because our brain relies on familiar pattern. When I leave the office, I turn off my computer. But when I have to evacuate, something I have never done before, I don't know how to respond. I don't know what to do. I don't have any plan. So my brain takes me down the only path it knows, because I have never been trained to do anything different. And here is something I didn't expect when I started preparing this talk. This isn't just talk about risks, our brain, decisions, and poor decisions. It is talk about kindness. As a disaster researcher, it pains me to watch and read about poor decisions. And I have been sarcastic about them more times than I would like to admit. Just ask my students. Some of them are here tonight. But the truth is, people don't make, usually, dangerous choices because they want to. They make them because they feel they are safe. And sometimes they make these dangerous choices for the exact opposite reason. Because they believe they are in danger, even when they are actually not. So what can we do about that? We educate, we train, we talk. We need to open a dialogue and really talk with people about why they believe what they believe. Why someone thinks COVID is a myth. Why some people believe face masks are dangerous, causing CO2 poisoning. Why is someone so sure he or she will know what to do when something happens, even though there was no previous training or whatsoever? These beliefs are a result of fear, misinformation, lack of information, people around you, you name it. And when we have this talk, the tone matters. We need to fill the room with kindness and empathy, because if we will be dismissive, judgmental, or mocking, people will simply turn away. And honestly, I don't blame them. And if they do that, someone else, probably disinformation spreaders or someone similar, will be there, offering a sympathetic shoulder and simple solutions to very complex problems. And finally, don't fall for that expert illusion, that belief, when something happens, I will for sure know what to do. If you haven't trained it, if you haven't practiced it, I'm so sorry, but you won't. So the next time when someone gives you safety instructions, for example on a plane, listen. Because even when the chance of being in a plane crash is about 1 in 880,000 flights, your life is worth it. Thank you.